The wrench slipped from Eli's hand, clattering against the concrete floor of his auto shop. The sound swallowed by the scream of tires outside. He froze, heart pounding, as 3 black SUVs screeched to a halt, their tinted windows reflecting the dawn light like cold, unblinking eyes. His 6-year-old son, Noah, was still asleep in the back room, caught oblivious to the storm about to break. Eli Harper, 38, had built a quiet life in the small town of Willow Creek, Virginia. A gay single dad. He'd learned to keep his head down, his heart guarded, and his focus on raising Noah. The auto shop, Harper's garage, was his sanctuary, a place where he could fix what was broken, even if his own life felt like a machine too rusted to repair. Last night, though, something had shifted. A stranger had stumbled into his shop just before closing, desperate, with a truck that wouldn't start. Eli hadn't planned on staying late, but the man's quiet panic, those haunted blue eyes, had stirred something in him. He'd fixed the truck, sent the stranger on his way, and thought that was the end of it. Now, as the SUV's doors swung open and men in dark suits spilled out, Eli's gut twisted. He grabbed the wrench again, not as a tool but a weapon, and stepped toward the front door. His shop was a mile from town, isolated on a stretch of Route 17 where the pines whispered secrets and the world felt far away. Whatever this was, it wasn't about an unpaid bill or a traffic stop. "Stay back, Noah," he whispered, though his son hadn't stirred. The first man out of the lead SUV was tall, broad-shouldered, with a face carved from stone. He didn't knock, just pushed the door open, the bell above jangling like a warning. "Elijah Harper?" the man asked. His voice clipped. "Official." Eli tightened his grip on the wrench. "Who's asking?" The man didn't flinch, but his eyes flicked to the wrench, then back to Eli's face. "Agent Carter, FBI. We need to talk about the man you helped last night." Eli's breath caught. The stranger, James. He'd said his name had seemed harmless. Tired. Maybe running from something. But not dangerous. Eli had spent 2 hours under the hood of that beat-up Ford, replacing a busted fuel pump while James sat quietly, nursing a coffee from the shop's ancient machine. They'd barely spoken, but there'd been a momentous glance, a brush of hands when Eli handed him the keys that felt like a spark in a dark room. Eli had pushed it down. Like always, he didn't have time for sparks. "What about him?" Eli asked, his voice steady despite the pulse hammering in his throat. Agent Carter stepped closer, his suit crisp against the shop's grime. "That man is wanted in connection to a federal investigation. You helped him flee. We need to know everything," he said. "Everything you did." Eli's mind raced. James hadn't said much, just that he was passing through. Needed to get to Richmond by morning. His truck had broken down on the highway, and Eli's shop was the only place open for miles. Eli hadn't asked questions. He never did. People in Willow Creek valued discretion. And Eli had learned long ago that prying could cost you more than it gained. "I fixed his truck," Eli said. "That's it." He paid cash. Left. Didn't say where he was going. Carter's eyes narrowed. "You're telling me a man shows up at your shop at 10 p.m. You stay late to help him, and you don't ask a single question?" Eli's jaw tightened. "I run a business. People need help. I help." The agent's lips twitched. Not quite a smile. "You're a good guy," Mr. Harper. But good guys can get in bad trouble. That man James Callahan isn't who you think he is. The name hit like a punch. Callahan. It sounded familiar, but Eli couldn't place it. Before he could respond, Noah's small voice cut through the tension. Dad, what's going on? Eli spun around. Noah stood in the doorway to the back room, rubbing sleep from his eyes. His dinosaur pajamas wrinkled. Eli's heart lurched. Go back to bed, buddy. It's okay. But it wasn't okay. The other agents were fanning out. One peering through the shop's windows, another circling toward the back. Eli felt the walls closing in. He'd spent years protecting Noah from the world's judgment, the whispers about a gay dad in a small town, the sideways looks at church picnics. He'd built a fortress around his son. But now it was crumbling. Mr. Harper, Carter said, softer now. We're not here to hurt you or your boy. But Callahan's dangerous. If you're protecting him, I'm not. Eli snapped. I don't even know him. Then why'd you stay late? Carter pressed. Why'd you let a stranger into your life? Eli didn't answer. He couldn't. Because the truth was, something about James had felt familiar. Not his face, not his name, but the weight in his eyes. Like he was carrying a wound Eli recognized. Loneliness. Fear. The kind of pain that came from hiding who you were. The bell jingled again. Another agent stepped in, holding a tablet. Sir, he said to Carter, we've got a hit. Callahan's truck was spotted 20 miles north. Abandoned. Carter's gaze didn't leave Eli. You're lucky, Mr. Harper. But we're not done. You're coming with us. Eli's stomach dropped. What? No. I've got a kid. A business. And we've got a fugitive. Carter cut in. You helped him. That makes you part of this. Noah ran to Eli's side, clutching his leg. Dad, don't go. Eli knelt, pulling Noah close, his voice low and steady. It's okay, buddy. I'll be back soon. But as he looked into his son's wide, scared eyes, he wasn't sure he believed it. The ride to the FBI field office in Richmond was a blur. Eli sat in the back of an SUV. Noah left with a neighbor he trusted, his mind spinning with questions. Who was James Callahan? Why had he come to Eli's shop? And why did the memory of that fleeting glance keep burning in his chest? At the field office, Carter led him to a stark room with a metal table and 2 chairs. A file was slapped down in front of him. James Callahan, Carter said. Ex-CIA. Suspected of leaking classified intel. Last night, you gave him a way out. Eli stared at the photo in the file. James's face, those blue eyes. That tired slump stared back. I didn't know, Eli said, his voice hollow. Carter leaned in. Here's the deal, Harper. You help us find him, or we start digging into your life, your business, your son. Eli's blood ran cold. He'd fought too hard to keep Noah safe, to give him a life free from the shadows of judgment. He wasn't about to let this destroy it. But as he looked at James's photo, something stirred a memory of that spark. That moment when their hands brushed. He didn't know James Callahan, but he wanted to. Tell me what you need, Eli said, his voice steady. But inside, he was breaking. Eli's hands shook as he gripped the edge of the metal table, the cold biting into his palms. The FBI field office smelled of stale coffee and bureaucracy, a world away from the grease and grit of his shop. Agent Carter sat across from him, flipping through the file on James Callahan. Each page turned a silent accusation. "Start from the beginning," Carter said. "What did he say when he walked into your shop?" Eli's mind rewound to the previous night. James had appeared just as Eli was locking up, the neon Harper's garage sign already off. He'd been a silhouette against the dusk, his truck limping into the lot with a sputter. Eli had almost turned him away. Noah was waiting for dinner, but something in James's voice, low and frayed, had stopped him. "Please, I'm in trouble." He said his truck broke down. Eli told Carter, keeping his voice even. "Fuel pump was shot. I fixed it. He paid. Left. That's it." Carter's eyes narrowed. "You didn't ask why he was in such a hurry? Why he showed up at your shop? Of all places." Eli shrugged, but his chest tightened. He hadn't asked because he knew what it was like to run from something. Growing up gay in Willow Creek, he'd spent his teenage years dodging questions, hiding who he was. Even now, 38, he kept his life small safe. Fixing cars was easier than fixing himself. He didn't offer. "I didn't pry," Eli said. "People pass through. I don't make it my business." Carter leaned back, crossing his arms. "You're telling me you spent 2 hours with a guy, alone, and didn't get a single detail? Not where he was going, who he was meeting?" Eli's jaw clenched. He hadn't told Carter about the moment James's hand brushed his when he handed over the keys, or how James had lingered, his gaze holding Eli's just a second too long. It wasn't relevant. Couldn't be. But the memory burned, a flicker of something Eli hadn't felt in years. "I told you." He didn't say much. Eli said, "Just needed to get to Richmond." Carter slid a photo across the table. James, younger, in a suit, standing beside a man Eli didn't recognize. "This is Callahan with his handler. Back when he was CIA. He's been off the grid for 6 months. Last night, he surfaces at your shop. You really expect me to believe that's a coincidence?" Eli stared at the photo, his stomach twisting. James didn't look like a spy. He looked broken, like someone who'd been running too long. "I don't know what you want me to say," Eli said. "I'm a mechanic, not a detective." Carter's phone buzzed, and he glanced at it, his expression darkening. "We found the truck. Empty. No sign of Callahan." He stood, motioning to another agent in the doorway. "You're free to go, Harper. But don't leave town. We'll be watching." Eli drove back to Willow Creek in silence, the hum of his old Chevy no match for the storm in his head. Noah was with Mrs. Delaney, the neighbor who'd watched him grow up. But Eli couldn't shake the fear that this wasn't over. The FBI didn't show up for nothing. And James, wherever he was, had left a crack in Eli's carefully built walls. When he pulled into his driveway, Noah ran out, throwing his arms around Eli's waist. "You're back. Did you get in trouble?" Eli forced a smile, ruffling Noah's hair. "Nah, buddy. Just had to answer some questions." But as he tucked Noah into bed that night, Eli couldn't stop thinking about James. The man's quiet voice. The weight in his eyes. Eli had spent years avoiding connection, terrified of what it could cost. Being openly gay in a small town wasn't easy every date. Every glance carried the risk of judgment. He'd told himself Noah was enough, that love was a luxury he couldn't afford. But James had stirred something, and now Eli was caught in a web he didn't understand. The next morning, Eli opened the shop early, needing the routine to ground him. He was under the hood of a sedan when the bell jingled. He looked up, expecting a customer, but it was James. Eli's heart stopped. James looked worse than before, pale, unshaven, his jacket torn. "I need your help," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What the hell are you doing here?" Eli hissed, glancing at the windows, half expecting those SUVs to roll up again. "The FBI's after you." "I know," James said, stepping closer. "I didn't mean to drag you into this, but you're the only one I trust." Eli's pulse raced. Trust. They'd known each other for 2 hours. But James's eyes, those damn blue eyes, held a plea that cut through Eli's defenses. "Why me?" he asked, his voice softer than he meant it to be. James hesitated, then reached into his pocket, pulling out a small, crumpled photo. It was Eli, years ago, laughing at a bar in Richmond. Eli's blood ran cold. "Where did you get that?" "I've been looking for you," James said. "Not by choice. They sent me." "Who's they?" Eli demanded, his voice rising. Noah was at school, but the shop felt too exposed, too vulnerable. James glanced at the door, then back at Eli. "I'll explain everything, but not here. Please, Eli. I'm not who they say I am." Against every instinct, Eli nodded. He didn't know why, but he believed James. Or maybe he just wanted to. "There's a back room," he said. "We can talk there." As they moved, Eli's mind screamed warnings, but his heart, stubborn, reckless, kept pulling him toward the man who'd walked into his life and turned it upside down. The back room of Harper's garage was cramped, cluttered with old tools and a cot where Noah sometimes napped. Eli shut the door behind them, the click echoing in the tense silence. James stood by the wall, his hands shoved in his pockets, looking like a man who hadn't slept in days. "Start talking," Eli said, crossing his arms. "Who are you, really? And why do you have a picture of me?" James's shoulders slumped, but his eyes didn't waver. "My name's James Callahan. That part's true. I was CIA, but I left 3 years ago. Or tried to." He pulled the photo from his pocket again, smoothing it out. This was given to me 6 months ago. By people who want you." Eli's stomach churned. The photo was from a night he barely remembered, a rare moment of freedom before Noah. Before he'd settled into the cautious life of a single dad. "Why me? I'm nobody. Just a guy fixing cars." James shook his head. "You're not nobody. Your brother Mark was CIA too. He was my partner." Eli froze. Mark, his older brother, dead 5 years now, killed in a car accident, or so Eli had been told. They hadn't been close. Mark's work had kept him distant, his life a mystery. "Mark's gone," Eli said, his voice tight. "What does he have to do with this?" James stepped closer, his voice low. Mark didn't die in an accident. He was working on something big, something dangerous. He hid it. And they think you know where it is. Eli's head spun. I don't know anything. Mark never told me about his work. They don't believe that, James said. And they don't care. They'll come for you, Eli. For Noah. The mention of his son snapped Eli back. Don't bring him into this. He growled. You show up. Drag the FBI to my door. And now you're telling me my brother was murdered. What do you want from me? James's face softened. And for a moment, he looked less like a fugitive and more like a man drowning. I want to keep you safe. I owe Mark that much. When I saw you last night, I didn't expect you to be. He stopped, his cheeks flushing slightly. I didn't expect you. Eli's breath caught. There it was again, that spark. That pull he'd felt the night before. He pushed it down, focusing on the fear, the anger. You're saying I'm in danger because of something I don't even know about? James nodded. The people after Methuri, not FBI. Not entirely. They're a splinter group. Ex-agents running their own game. They want what Mark hid. And they think you're the key. Eli ran a hand through his hair, pacing the small room. This is insane. I've got a kid. A life. I can't just. He stopped, meeting James's eyes. Why should I trust you? James hesitated, then reached out, his hand brushing Eli's arm. The touch was brief, but it sent a jolt through Eli's chest. Because I'm risking everything to be here, James said. I could have kept running, but I came back. For you. Eli wanted to pull away, to shut this down. But he didn't. Instead, he asked, what do we do? James's relief was palpable. We need to find what Mark hid. It's the only way to stop them. I think it's here, in Willow Creek. He mentioned this town once. Said it was his safe place. Eli's mind raced. Mark had grown up here, same as him. But he'd left for the CIA and never looked back. If he'd hidden something, it could be anywhere, the old house they'd grown up in, now abandoned, or somewhere else entirely. Okay, Eli said finally. But Noah stays out of this. I'll help you, but only if you swear he's safe. I swear, James said, his voice steady. I'll do whatever it takes. They spent the next hour piecing together what little James knew. Mark had been working on a list names of operatives involved in illegal arms deals. A network that reached into the highest levels of government. He'd encrypted it, hidden it, and died before he could deliver it. The splinter group wanted it. And they'd been hunting James ever since he'd tried to finish what Mark started. As they talked, Eli couldn't ignore the way James's presence filled the room. It wasn't just the danger. The stakes it was the way James looked at him. Like he saw past the grease stains and the walls Eli had built. It was dangerous, reckless. But Eli felt alive in a way he hadn't in years. We should check the old house, Eli said at last. It's been empty since Mom died. If Mark hid something, it'd be there. James nodded. We'll go tonight. Less chance of being seen. The day passed in a blur. Eli sent Noah to stay with Mrs. Delaney again, hating the lie he told about a late job. When night fell, he and James drove to the edge of town, the old Harper house looming in the moonlight. It was a crumbling relic, Paint peeling. Windows boarded. Eli's chest tightened as they stepped inside. The air thick with dust and memories. They searched for hours, tearing through floorboards, checking walls, finding nothing. Eli was starting to think James was wrong when he noticed a loose brick in the fireplace. He pried it free, revealing a small metal box. Inside was a USB drive, its surface scratched but intact. "Is this it?" Eli asked, holding it up. James's eyes widened. "It has to be." Before Eli could respond, headlights flashed through the window. Tires crunched on gravel. James grabbed Eli's arm, pulling him toward the back door. "They're here," he whispered. "Run." Eli's boots pounded against the forest floor, branches snapping underfoot as he and James fled the old Harper house. The USB drive burned a hole in his pocket, its weight heavier than its size. Headlights swept through the trees behind them, the roar of engines closing in. "Keep moving," James hissed, his hand gripping Eli's wrist. They ducked behind a cluster of pines, the air sharp with sap and fear. Eli's heart thundered, not just from the chase but from the realization that he'd stepped into a world he didn't understand, one that could cost him everything. The engines stopped, replaced by voice slow, urgent, professional, spread out. Someone barked. "They can't have gone far." Eli crouched lower, his breath shallow. James was close, too close, his warmth a stark contrast to the cold night. "Who are these people?" Eli whispered, his voice barely audible. James's eyes were dark, unreadable. "The splinter group I told you about. They're not playing by the rules. If they get that drive, it's over for us, for everyone Mark was trying to protect." Eli's mind reeled. Mark, his brother, had always been the brave one, the one who left Willow Creek to chase something bigger. Eli had stayed, chosen safety, chosen Noah. Now, that choice felt like a trap. "What's on this drive?" he asked, his hand closing around it. "Names," James said. "Proof of corruption arms deals. Payoffs. Operatives who've gone rogue. Mark was gonna blow it wide open. That's why they killed him." Eli's throat tightened. He'd spent years believing Mark's death was an accident, a cruel twist of fate. Now, the truth was a blade, cutting through the life he'd built. "And you? Why are you still fighting for this?" James looked at him, his expression raw. "Because Mark was my friend. And because I know what it's like to lose everything." The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken pain. Eli wanted to ask more, but a twig snapped nearby, and James pressed a finger to his lips. Footsteps crunched closer, a flashlight beam slicing through the darkness. Eli's pulse spiked. He thought of Noah. Safe for now. But for how long? "We need to move," James whispered. "There's a creek half a mile east. If we can get there, we can lose them." Eli nodded, though every instinct screamed to go back, to hide, to protect his son. But he followed James, weaving through the trees, the USB drive a ticking bomb in his pocket. The creek was shallow, its water cold as they waded through, the current tugging at their ankles. They kept low, moving fast, until the voices faded and the night grew still. They collapsed on the bank, panting, soaked. Eli's hands shook as he pulled the drive from his pocket, checking it was still there. "What now?" he asked, his voice rough. James wiped mud from his face, his eyes meeting Eli's. "We need to get that to someone who can use it. There's a journalist in D.C. Sarah Klein. She's been digging into this for years. If we can get it to her, she'll know what to do." D.C. Eli said, incredulous. "That's a 6-hour drive. And the FBI's already on my tail. How am I supposed to?" "I'll go with you," James cut in. "You don't have to do this alone." Eli stared at him, the words sinking in. Alone. He'd been alone for so long since his ex left. Since Mark died. Since he'd learned to bury his heart to keep Noah safe. But James's presence, his quiet strength, was unraveling that. "Why are you doing this?" Eli asked, softer now. "You could disappear. Save yourself." James's gaze held his, unflinching. "Because I saw you last night, Eli. I saw a man who helps strangers, who loves his kid, who doesn't give up. I haven't had that in a long time." Eli's chest tightened, a mix of fear and something warmer, something dangerous. He pushed it down, focusing on the drive. "Okay. D.C. But Noah comes first. Always." James nodded. "I know. We'll keep him safe." They trekked back to town under cover of darkness, avoiding the main roads. Eli's truck was still at the shop, and they slipped inside, the familiar smell of oil and metal grounding him. He grabbed a burner phone from a drawer, a habit from years of living cautiously, and called Mrs. Delaney. "Everything okay with Noah?" he asked, his voice tight. "He's fine, Eli," she said. "Sleeping like an angel. You okay?" "Yeah." He lied. "I'll pick him up tomorrow." He hung up, turning to James. "We leave at dawn. But if this goes south, you get me back to my son. Promise me." "I promise," James said, his voice steady but his eyes soft, like he understood the weight of it. As they settled in the back room to wait out the night, Eli couldn't shake the feeling that James was more than a fugitive, more than a stranger. There was a connection, fragile but real, growing in the spaces between their words. And as they sat in the dark, shoulders brushing, Eli let himself wonder, just for a moment, what it would be like to let someone in. Dawn broke over Willow Creek, painting the sky in streaks of pink and gold. Eli and James sat in Eli's truck, the engine idling as they prepared to leave for D.C. The USB drive was tucked in Eli's jacket, a small weight carrying a world of danger. He glanced at the shop, its faded sign a symbol of the life he was risking. "You sure about this?" James asked, his voice low. He sat in the passenger seat, his hands restless, eyes scanning the empty road. "No," Eli admitted, gripping the wheel. "But I don't see another way. If what you're saying is true, these people won't stop. Not until they get this driver us." James nodded, his jaw tight. "I'm sorry I dragged you into this." Eli looked at him, the morning light catching the lines of his face. "You didn't drag me. I chose to help you." He didn't add that he wasn't sure why, only that James's presence made him feel something he hadn't in years. Hope. fear, desire. They drove in silence for the first hour, the Virginia countryside blurring past. Eli's thoughts kept drifting to Noah, to the life he'd built so carefully. Being a gay single dad in a small town had taught him to expect judgment, to brace for it. But this was something else. This was a fight he hadn't chosen, yet couldn't walk away from. Halfway to D.C., James broke the silence. You ever think about leaving Willow Creek? Eli glanced at him, surprised. Sometimes. But it's home. Noah's got friends. School. I can't just uproot him. James nodded, looking out the window. I left my home a long time ago. Haven't had one since. Where was home? Eli asked, curious despite himself. Boston, James said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Grew up in a row house. Mom cooking pasta every Sunday. Then I joined the CIA. And home became wherever I was sent. Eli's chest ached. He knew that kind of loss, not a place, but a piece of yourself. What about now? You still running? James turned to him, his eyes steady. Not anymore. Not after meeting you. The words hit harder than Eli expected, stirring that dangerous warmth again. He focused on the road, but his hands tightened on the wheel. Don't say things like that, he muttered. Not when we're in this deep. James didn't push, but the air between them felt charged. Alive. They stopped at a gas station outside Fredericksburg. The lot empty except for a lone attendant. Eli filled the tank while James went inside for coffee. He was halfway through when a black SUV pulled in. Slow and deliberate. Eli's heart sank. He capped the gas tank. Eyes locked on the SUV. Two men stepped out. Their movements too precise. Too controlled. He slipped into the driver's seat, starting the engine just as James emerged from the store, his face paling as he saw the SUV. Get in, Eli said, his voice sharp. James dove into the passenger seat, and Eli floored it, the truck lurching onto the highway. The SUV followed, its engine roaring. They found us, James said, checking the side mirror. They must have tracked the drive. How? Eli demanded, weaving through traffic. I don't know, James said, frustration lacing his voice. It's encrypted, but they've got tech I don't understand. The chase stretched on, the SUV gaining ground. Eli's mind raced, calculating. He knew these roads had driven them 100 times. Hold on, he said, jerking the wheel to take an exit toward a narrow country road. The SUV followed, but Eli had the advantage. His truck built for rough terrain. He pushed it hard, kicking up dust as they barreled through fields, the SUV struggling to keep up. They lost it after 10 minutes. The road empty behind them. Eli pulled into a wooded area, cutting the engine. His hands shook, adrenaline coursing through him. That was too close, he said, turning to James. James was breathing hard, his eyes wide. You're good at this. I'm a dad, Eli said, managing a weak smile. I'm used to emergencies. James laughed, a short, surprised sound that broke the tension. For a moment, they just sat there, the world quiet except for their breathing. Then James reached out, his hand resting on Eli's. "Thank you," he said softly, "for not giving up on me." Eli didn't pull away. The touch was warm, grounding, and he let it linger, even as his mind screamed to keep his walls up. "We're not out of this yet," he said, but his voice was softer, less certain. They drove on, sticking to back roads, the USB drive a silent passenger. By the time they reached D.C., the city was alive with afternoon traffic. James directed them to a small coffee shop in Georgetown, where Sarah Klein was waiting. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, her laptop open, her demeanor all business. "You've got it?" she asked. No preamble. Eli handed her the drive, his fingers reluctant to let it go. "This better be worth it," he said. Sarah plugged it into her laptop, her fingers flying. "If this is what I think it is, it'll bring down a lot of powerful people." She glanced at James. Then Eli. "You two need to lay low. They'll come for you next." Eli's stomach twisted. Noah. He needed to get back to Noah. But as he looked at James, at the man who'd turned his life upside down, he knew he wasn't ready to walk away. Not yet. The Georgetown coffee shop buzzed with quiet chatter. But Eli felt like the world had narrowed to the small table where he, James, and Sarah sat. Sarah's laptop screen glowed with lines of code as she decrypted the USB drive, her face tense with concentration. Eli's leg bounced under the table, his thoughts torn between the danger they were in and the need to get back to Noah. "It's real," Sarah said finally, her voice low. "Names, dates, transactions mark compiled enough to take down half the black market arms trade. This is bigger than I thought." Eli glanced at James, whose eyes were fixed on the screen. "What happens now?" Eli asked. Sarah didn't look up. "I publish. Get this to the right people, senators, DOJ, anyone who's not bought. But it's not safe yet. These guys will do anything to stop this." Eli's chest tightened. "I need to get home. My son." "I know," Sarah said, her tone softening. "But you're not safe in Willow Creek. Not until this goes public." James reached for Eli's hand under the table. A brief, steadying touch. "We'll figure it out," he said. "I promised you Noah would be safe." Eli wanted to believe him, but the weight of the past 2 days was crushing. He'd gone from fixing a stranger's truck to running from rogue agents, all because of a brother he'd barely known. And yet, James's presence, his quiet strength, his unwavering resolve kept Eli anchored. Sarah closed her laptop. "I need 24 hours to verify this and get it to my contacts. Stay off the grid until then. No phones. No cards. I've got a safe house in Arlington. You can crash there." Eli hesitated. "What about Noah?" "Call your neighbor," James said. "Tell her to take him to her sister's place in Roanoke. It's far enough." Eli nodded, pulling out the burner phone. "Mrs. Delaney answered on the first ring, her voice warm but worried. "Eli, where are you?" "D.C., he said, keeping it vague. "Can you take Noah to your sister's for a couple days? I'll explain later." She didn't press. Bless her. "Of course. Honey. He's already packed." Eli hung up, relief warring with guilt. Noah was his world, and every moment away from him felt like a betrayal. But he trusted Mrs. Delaney, and right now, that had to be enough. The safe house was a nondescript row house in Arlington. Its windows shuttered, its walls bare. Sarah gave them keys and a warning. No contact with anyone. I'll find you when it's done. Inside, the silence was deafening. Eli dropped onto a worn couch, his head in his hands. James sat beside him, close but not touching. You okay? James asked. Eli laughed, a bitter sound. No. I'm terrified. For Noah. For me. For whatever this is. He gestured vaguely between them. James's eyes softened. I know. I didn't mean for any of this. But you meant to find me, Eli said, his voice sharp. You said they sent you. What's that about? James leaned back, exhaling. Mark talked about you. Not details. Just, you were his anchor. He said if anything happened to him, I should look out for you. When I got out of the CIA, I tried to disappear. But they found me, gave me that photo, told me to track you down. I didn't know why until I saw the drive. Eli's throat tightened. Mark. Always protecting him. Even from the grave. And now what? You're stuck with me. James smiled. A small, genuine thing. I'm not complaining. The air shifted, heavy with possibility. Eli's walls, the ones he'd built to keep Noah safe, to keep himself safe, were crumbling. He looked at James, really looked, and saw a man who'd lost as much as he had, who was fighting for something bigger than himself. And maybe, just maybe, for Eli. I haven't done this in a long time, Eli said, his voice barely above a whisper. Let someone in. James reached out, his hand resting on Eli's knee. Me neither. But I want to try. With you. The words hung there, fragile and real. Eli leaned in, their foreheads touching, their breaths mingling. It wasn't a kiss not yet, but it was a promise. One Eli wasn't sure he could keep but desperately wanted to. The next morning, Sarah called the burner phone. It's done, she said. The story's out. Front page of the Post. DOJ's launching an investigation. Eli's relief was immediate, but it didn't last. What about us? He asked. You're clear, Sarah said. But stay low until the dust settles. These guys don't give up easy. Eli hung up, turning to James. It's over. James shook his head. Not yet. They'll come for us one more time. We need to be ready. Eli's heart sank. But he nodded. He'd come this far. For Noah. For Mark. For the man sitting beside him to see it through. The Arlington safe house felt like a cage. Its walls closing in as Eli and James waited for the other shoe to drop. The news was out. Sarah's article had blown the lid off the arms network. Naming names. Exposing corruption. But Eli knew better than to think it was over. The splinter group, whoever they were, wouldn't vanish quietly. James paced the small living room. His phone another burner clutched in his hand. Sarah's contacts at the DOJ are moving fast, he said. Arrests are happening. But these guys, they're ghosts. They'll want revenge. Eli sat on the couch, his mind on Noah. Mrs. Delaney had texted from Roanoke. Noah was safe, happy, oblivious. But every hour away from his son was a knife in Eli's chest. "What do we do?" he asked, his voice steady despite the fear. James stopped pacing, meeting Eli's eyes. "We stay here until Sarah gives the all clear. Then we get you back to Noah." "And you?" Eli asked, the question heavier than he meant it to be. James hesitated, his expression softening. "I don't know. I haven't had a reason to stay anywhere in a long time." The words hung between them, an invitation Eli wasn't ready to answer. Not yet. But the pull was undeniable, a thread tying them together through the chaos. He stood, crossing to James, their faces inches apart. "You could stay," Eli said, his voice low. "In Willow Creek. With us." James's breath hitched, but before he could respond, the burner phone buzzed. Sarah's voice was tense. "They're coming. 2 SUVs. Headed your way. Get out now." Eli's heart stopped. James grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the back door. "We need to move." They slipped into the alley behind the row house, the afternoon sun harsh after the dim safe house. James led the way, his movements sharp, practiced. They ducked into a nearby parking garage, hiding behind a van as engines roared closer. Eli's pulse thundered, his mind racing. He wasn't trained for She was a mechanic, a dad. But James's hand on his arm was a lifeline, steadying him. "They're not FBI," James whispered, peering around the van. "Private contractors, hired to clean up." Eli's stomach churned. "What do we do?" James's eyes flicked to the stairwell. "We get to the roof. There's a fire escape on the other side. We can lose them in the streets." They moved fast, climbing the stairs 2 at a time. The roof was empty, the city sprawling below, a maze of possibility and danger. The fire escape creaked as they descended, landing in another alley. James pulled Eli toward a crowded street, blending into the foot traffic. They didn't stop until they reached a small park, its benches filled with people unaware of the storm Eli and James were running from. Eli's legs burned, his chest tight. "How do we end this?" he asked, breathless. James's face was grim. "We don't. Not until they're all in custody. But Sarah's working on it. We just need to hold out." Eli nodded, but his thoughts were on Noah. He couldn't keep running, couldn't keep hiding. "I need to see my son," he said. "I can't do this anymore." James's hand found his, squeezing gently. "I know. We'll get you back to him. I promise." They found a cheap motel on the outskirts of D.C., paying cash, staying off the grid. The room was small, the bed sagging, but it was a moment to breathe. Eli sat on the edge of the mattress, his head in his hands. James sat beside him, silent but close. "I'm scared," Eli admitted, the words spilling out. "Not just for me. For Noah. For what happens if I don't make it back." James's hand rested on his shoulder, warm and steady. "You'll make it back. I won't let anything happen to you." Eli looked up, their eyes locking. The space between them vanished. And this time, Eli didn't pull away. Their lips met, soft at first, then urgent. A release of everything they'd held back. Fear, hope, longing, it all poured into that kiss. A moment of clarity in the chaos. When they pulled apart, Eli's heart was racing. But for once, it wasn't from fear. "What are we doing?" he whispered. James smiled. A rare, genuine thing. Something real. They stayed up, talking, planning. James told Eli about his years in the CIA. The missions that had broken him. The guilt over Mark's death. Eli shared his own story, coming out in a town that didn't understand. Raising Noah alone. Learning to love quietly. By morning, they weren't just allies, they were something more. Sarah's call came at dawn. "It's over," she said. "The last of them were arrested last night. You're safe." Eli's relief was overwhelming. But he needed to see Noah. To hold him. James drove. The road to Roanoke a blur of anticipation. When they pulled into Mrs. Delaney's sister's driveway, Noah ran out, throwing himself into Eli's arms. "Dad." Noah cried, his small arms tight around Eli's neck. Eli held him, tears burning his eyes. "I'm here, buddy. I'm here." James stood back, watching, a quiet smile on his face. And as Eli looked at him, he knew this wasn't the end, not for them. Back in Willow Creek, the air felt different, lighter, but not without scars. Eli stood in his shop, the familiar clank of tools grounding him as he worked on a customer's sedan. Noah was at school, his laughter echoing in Eli's memory from their reunion in Roanoke. The danger was over. The splinter group dismantled. Their names splashed across every news outlet. But the quiet moments were where Eli felt the weight of what had changed. James hadn't left. He'd rented a small apartment above the diner in town, claiming he needed a break from running. Eli knew it was about them. About the fragile thing they'd built in the chaos. They hadn't put a name to it. Not yet. But every glance, every touch, was a step toward something real. That afternoon, James stopped by the shop, leaning against the counter with a coffee in hand. "Got a job yet?" Eli teased, wiping grease from his hands. James grinned, a spark in his eyes. "Thinking about it. Maybe I'll stick around. Learn to fix cars." Eli laughed, the sound easier than it had been in weeks. "You'd be terrible. Too much finesse. Not enough grit." James stepped closer, his voice low. "I've got grit. You just haven't seen it yet." The air crackled, and Eli felt that pull again. The one that had started with a stranger's truck and a late-night repair. He didn't fight it this time. "Come over tonight," he said. "Noah's been asking about you." James's smile softened. Yeah, Eli said, his heart steady. "He likes you. And so do I." That night, they sat on Eli's porch, Noah asleep inside, the stars bright above Willow Creek. James told stories of his old life. The good part: Sunday dinners in Boston, hiking with Mark in the mountains. Eli shared his own teaching Noah to ride a bike. The pride of keeping the shop afloat. They talked about the future, tentative but hopeful, about what it might mean to build something together. "I'm not good at this," Eli admitted, his voice quiet. "Letting people in. After everything Mark, my ex, This town I learned to keep things simple. James reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining. Simple's overrated. I'd rather have messy with you. Eli's chest warmed, the fear that had defined him for so long giving way to something new. He thought of Mark, of the brother who'd fought for justice, who'd left a legacy Eli was only now beginning to understand. He thought of Noah, his reason for everything. And he thought of James, the man who'd walked into his life and refused to let him face it alone. They stayed there, hands clasped, the night stretching out before them. The world wasn't perfect. Willow Creek still had its whispers, its judgments, but Eli wasn't hiding anymore. He'd fixed a stranger's truck, and in doing so, he'd found a piece of himself he thought was lost. As the crickets sang and the stars burned, Eli leaned into James, their shoulders brushing. It wasn't an ending, but a beginning, one built on trust, on courage, on the kind of love that could weather any storm.